Oh, there we go, bit of smoke coming in. Hello, welcome back to the channel. I'm Richard Vobes. This is my vlog. Today I thought I would cook a chicken stew, I think. So I've got this. Now, if you were a regular viewer, you'll notice that I did a video the other day in which I said I don't use this very often. This is one of these casserole dishes or French ovens. It's a cast iron thing. So this isn't a cooking show, by the way. This is more just my vlog where I just want to basically chat to you, give you a bit of something to think about or something to watch on these cold, miserable, wintry days that we have here in the UK. Of course, I appreciate many of the viewers may be somewhere else in the world, and I hope that you have nicer climes. So I've got a range of vegetables on the table. This is one of my one-shot wonders, so I can't cut to any of this stuff, but I'm going to do chicken. I've got some rather pale, pasty, commercial, highly industrialized produced chicken breast, so I'm not expecting great flavor from it. I'm hoping that there will be some nutrients or something in it, but unless you pay a lot of money, and I know in the past I'm here doing this hypocritically, because in the past I said I only go to farm shops and buy stuff, which was the intention, but the cost of getting in the van now and putting the diesel in has just wiped that out. So I'm reducing how much meat I eat, but occasionally I do eat some, and I believe that meat is good for you. I'm not one of these people who think that we should have everything that's plant-based and get rid of animals. I just don't like the mass scale of it, particularly for fast food outlets where a lot of it is wasted and the food stuff isn't necessarily the best quality. And I think if you're going to eat an animal, a living, breathing animal, and you're going to rear it and then slaughter it, I think A, you should give it the best life possible, and B, you should respect the meat that you get from it, rather than in a drunken state at the end of an evening down the pub, just nip down to a kebab shop or a fast chicken outlet and eat chicken which you have no respect for the animal and where it's come from. And because of that demand, we have the ugly situation of food processing in this country with animals. I'm not in favour of that, but I'm the reverse. Talking of plant-based food, there's a product here. I won't actually show you the name, but I've noticed that sometimes these people are just cashing in or insulting our intelligence. So this is an oat cake in this packet. Oat cake. It says plant-based food. It's an oat cake. Well, of course it's plant-based. If you don't realise that, then you need to go back to school. Anyway, so what I'm just basically going to do is I've got a bell pepper, I've got a courgette, I've got some carrots. These are just things I've got to use up. An onion, got the anemic chicken there, and cauliflower. So that's really it. And then I'm going to put into there a bit of paprika, a bit of black pepper, some garlic pepper, and I just bought these actually, mixed herbs, and a little bit of salt. That's it. I was looking at stock cubes, and I do have some up here on my shelf, and then I was looking at the ingredients, and I realised that half the ingredients rubbish. The other half, I probably got the natural ingredients in little pots like this anyway. And for a chicken stock, the average was 3% chicken went into a chicken stock. I thought, well, what's the point? So, there you go. Right, so I'm just going to shove the stuff straight into my pot. I don't have very good knives, unfortunately. It's something I need to invest. And when I cook, it is a little rustic. As I say, this isn't a cooking show. I'm indebted, by the way, I need to go and find the book in a minute, to Anne, very lovely Anne, who sent me a copy of Clarissa, what's her name? Clarissa Dixon Wright, I think, History of English Food. She was one of the two fat ladies that had a TV series. I don't even know if she's still around. I hope she is, but she may not. I know one of them, unfortunately, died. On that note, I would just like to say, it just suddenly reminded me, I was going to do this, and I will do it, but I want to make sure I do it, in one of my vlogs at least. And that is, I should dedicate this little cooking show, this sort of random chitty-chatty cooking show, to a very dear viewer called Charles Stell in Arkansas. Unfortunately, Charles, who's been listening to the original Vobes show back in 2005 that I started as an audio podcast, Charles, who I met in Arkansas, in the piney woods of Amity, I think it is, with his wife Brandy, in 2006, with a friend of mine at the time, who I don't really see anymore now, a chap called Jimmy. We went and stayed with him for one night, and we had moonshine, and it was very lovely. Unfortunately, Brandy died about 6 or 7 years ago, and I just heard yesterday evening that Charles has also died. I think he was 73, but he suffered a long illness. But I only heard from him about 6 weeks ago, maybe less, maybe a month ago. He was still there, slogging away. And it's very sad. I've had that once before when a viewer died who used to listen to me. And the other viewer I'd never met. It's quite profound when you learn that somebody who actually likes what you do. So I dropped one on the floor, but don't worry. It's still okay. Don't tell Julia, she's going to eat this with me later on this evening. It's very sad when you hear that somebody has died and you don't really have much of a connection to them. But I did have in the show, and it just makes you feel really sad. And 73 is no age to go. But anyway, I dug out to the lady who informed me that I keep the skins on, by the way. I don't bother with all that peeling business. I dug out. There's not much in the way of vegetables in here. I dug out a sweeper, an audio sweeper that we recorded, which had Charles's voice in it, and I sent that to her so that she had something to remember him by, as well as the laughter and fun that Jimmy and I had when we met him and Brandy. So it's just a little. I can't play it, unfortunately, on YouTube because there's a little bit of copyright music in it. I didn't put it together actually, although I'm in it. A friend of mine, Phil Clark, put it together for us, and it's just a bit of fun, really. It's just a bit of fun. Anyway, I just wanted to say that reminded me. I don't quite know what. Oh yes, because I was talking about the two fat ladies. So Anne Wright very kindly sent me this wonderful book, and I had a quick, you know what it's like, somebody sends you a book. I'm reading numerous books all at once, but I sat down and had a little read of just the first few pages in there, and I thought, it's called The History of English Food. It's just up my street. Anne, thank you so much, you're so kind. It was Anne that inspired me to get my plate rack. You may have seen the plate rack in other videos that I made. She was going to give me the one her husband made her, bless her, but I, in the end, I decided I'd make one I'd have it a go before I accepted hers, and I'm very pleased and I'm very proud of the one I've done. Let's hope I don't chop my finger off here. There we go. And well, there's some arguments. I don't know if you can hear that. I'm very close to a supermarket, and very often I hear these arguments going off. But luckily, nothing. So I've got loads of veg in there at the moment, which is great. I'm going to chop up the chicken in a minute. What I wanted is, I just was doing some learning when I was reading this book, I took some notes. She starts her book in terms of the English food in 1550s and the 1150s and the 1160s, because she says that's the time when food starts to become a little bit more interesting than what is sustainably grown on the farms and things, you know, your normal sort of stuff, a bit of chicken, a bit of cow and a bit of this. And of course, she reminds us that at that time, in the Middle Ages, Henry II was on the throne. It was feudal England, so you had your allegiance, if you were anyone, was to the Lord, not so much to the country as a whole, but to the Lord. The Lord had his allegiance to the king. So if the king was planning, as they did through history, for whatever reasons, strategic reasons and things, to go to war, to have a battle, very often with the French, over land or whatever it was, it would be down to the lords to summon their militia. That one's disappeared. And Julia doesn't like cauliflower in huge numbers, by the way. So yeah, so that was really how it was all organised at the time, back in the medieval period. And of course food, which is what the book is mainly about, and I thought I might, you know, I'll read more and just share what I know as we go along. I've got a beautiful book, I can't remember the name of the woman, it's called Taste. It's a similar thing, and it talks about food throughout the history. We're gathering this up now, look. That is coming on nicely. And the Essie is doing well. Let's do the chicken, the onion. So people around that time would really have only been able to grow what they could get locally, what they could grow locally or rear locally. So, you know, the poor people would have been able to grow some stuff. Labour, of course, was absolutely crucial. And people, there wasn't so much homeless people back then. There was a few vagabonds and peddlers and people like that, itinerant travellers. But most people would have somewhere because their labour was necessary. So they would be employed in some fashion. And with that, they would have had perhaps a cottage or somewhere to live, because the Lord would want to look after the staff. I mean, these days you hear of people who abuse their staff, but back in those days, because you were being paid by giving somewhere to live or some food to grow or a piece of land to grow some food on, some basic stuff, the Lord would look after you. It wasn't in his interest to penalise you or be horrible to you, because he would make money from your labour. And of course he relied on you to grow food. So that was that situation. So stuff was grown. Of course, the interesting food was naturally grown or reared by the people with the money, the king, of course, and the lords themselves. I've just cut onions, haven't I? Suddenly got that going up into my eyeballs. I've got one bell pepper to do next, and then we'll get on to the chicken. And you won't see the result of this, by the way, because as I say, oh golly, my eye now, I've only got the one eye, so I can close this eye and let the other eye look at you, although I can't see a thing out of it, which is a bizarre situation. Can't remember what I was on about then. Something to do with history of food, wasn't it? Yes, so the king and the lords would have the interesting food. So one of the things, of course, that was quite prevalent that they would rear, which now, you know, you might say farmers think of as a pest, is rabbits or conies. Now it's believed, I think, if I've got this right, that the Romans brought in hares. They may have brought in rabbits, but by the time the Normans came, they'd all gone. There was no trace of them. So the Normans brought in rabbits and they built these warrens. And they enclosed these warrens by walls and fences and stockades, I suppose, and they would build these massive mounds. I forget what they were called now. And so the rabbits would breed in there, and then the guys would harvest these rabbits or capture these rabbits with their ferrets and things, get them out, and then they would go in the pot. Of course, you know, these rabbits and all of this belonged to the lords, not the peasants. So you had all the poaching and stuff. Another thing that was, of course, and that was a delicacy. I mean, I don't know whether people have actually tried rabbit. There's something about rabbit that I don't know, because I've seen pet rabbits. I just feel, oh, I don't know if I could eat a rabbit, but I know people do. And of course, go back 100 or 150 years ago, people were only too pleased to have a rabbit, you know, particularly a free one, not one with myxomatosis or anything like that. When I do my chicken, I use a plastic tray rather than a wooden one, because I gather, and I often do the chicken last or with a different knife, and I normally have a fork. Just going to come around here out of view. I'm going to use both of these. So anyway, I've never tried rabbit. Maybe you have, and you can tell me what it's like, and it's probably perfectly respectable. But the other thing is pigeons. You know, that you would see all these old medieval pigeon cots, pigeon cot, in which they were like round houses with all these little holes in them where the pigeons would go in. And of course, nothing is wasted. Nothing is wasted. So with the rabbit, for example, I gather that the bones could be collected and used as a glue. The fur, of course, for the rabbit would make fur coats and various things. And the meat, of course, was to be eaten. And then with pigeons, the feathers would be useful for pillows and effective coverers and things like that, you know, like an eider down, but not eider, of course, pigeon down. And what was it? Oh, deer was another one. Deer was kept, of course, in deer parks, and they were all over the place. Some of these, the larger ones, were the king was only the one who was allowed to hunt in them, and his entourage and things like that, or the lord, I guess. But I think that more the king. And then the smaller deer parks were really there just to feed the rich, because the king would travel about, wouldn't he? He would travel around the country in order to keep his authority. He had to travel, and it wasn't just him and a couple of people riding on horse, you know, as you often see in the films. There was a massive, great train, not a choo-choo train, a massive train of different, you know, the cooks, the dressers, the butlers, the servants, the army, and all of that, and they all had to be fed, and they would take everything, all the kitchen utensils and bits and pieces. And one of the things they would also take, on a certain degree, was livestock, because in order to keep your meat fresh, it's best to keep it alive for as long as possible, and then slaughter it, butcher it, cook it, you know, within hours of the meal. Is the best way. You keep it fresh. Unless you've salted or put things in pickled and fats and things like that. Of course, going from estate to estate, the king could probably demand fresh meat from the places he went to as well. So he had a bit of that. Right, I think we're there really with all of this. Right, so wash those up very carefully in hot water. Put this over here. So fascinating book, and yes, I want to be able to share more of this with you when I do more of my English stuff in the new daily show, which is going to be new branded, because I had this thing about afternoon tea and morning coffee, and it was getting a bit confusing. So I'm just going to do one thing. We'll reveal that later on when it comes out. So a bit of black pepper. Julia doesn't like too much black pepper, I like it. A bit of rock salt, not too much. I'm going to put in a bit of paprika. I never quite know how much paprika to put in. And then I've got these, which is mixed herbs, which is new, and of course it's all in one of these little packets. Chuck that in the bin. Do tell me, I never know again how much to shove in of that. Oh, and I've got some fresh basil. I'm going to put some fresh basil in, which will make a bit of a difference. It's just a question of using, this is one of those stews where you just use up, this is garlic pepper. I don't really know what garlic pepper is actually. It's not made from garlic, is it? I'll shove a bit of that in. And then water, of course. And I'm not, as I say, I'm not going to use a stock. I'll go back to a different knife, not the one I just used. So I never quite know how much basil to shove in, but we'll... Fresh basil, bought that from the supermarket. Julia cut this up really tiny when she did it before, but I'm just going to not do it quite so tiny. Bung that in, and there it is. So I'm just going to add that with water. Let me just look. I'll just have a look at the time on the thing. This is all very cack-handed. You know that ordinarily I would make more effort. Sorry, I'm off camera now probably. Oh, you can just see the side of me. And I should just cook this on the top of the Essie and then put it in the oven. So I've done about 20 minutes, which is probably about long enough to keep you occupied, but put that on there. Sorry about the loud noises. And I need a wooden spoon. I've usually got one. So, oops. That's the water contracting. Hear that? That's the water underneath on the hot plate of the Essie. It's because the bottom, that's hot, and there is water, which is very difficult to wipe clean. There we go. Shouldn't do it now. And water gets trapped in between, and it can't, well, it's evaporating and the gas pushes it out. There's probably a name for it, and I can't think what it is. Anyway, that'll be nice. And then I'm not going to film this. I'll film this on another occasion. I'm going to make a crumble, an apple. I've got a little bit of those Bramleys and some other apples, which I'm going to make an apple crumble with a bit of custard for the lovely Julia this evening. But that's it. And I hope you enjoy these vlogs. They're just sort of very informal, just chit-chats. I enjoy doing them. So, you know, if you don't watch them, you don't watch them. It's fair enough. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time. Go and stir my little rabbit stew. Chicken. See you next time. Bye-bye.